My brain wanted to explode because I was raised in a conservative family, but somehow my heart and soul was a feminist. And my mum came from this really super conservative upbringing, and she was writing a will, and she made this decision that everything in the family, any financial benefit, went to my eldest brother because he was the eldest boy. And I just looked at my mum and I went, "You've got to be kidding me." I just went, "Dude, no, like, you got 4 kids, just split it 4 ways."
Welcome to Don't Be Caught Dead, a podcast encouraging open conversations about dying and the death of a loved one. I'm your host, Catherine Ashton, founder of Critical Info, and I'm helping to bring your stories of death back to life. Because while you may not be ready to die, at least you can be prepared. Don't Be Caught Dead acknowledges the lands of the Kulin Nations and recognises their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nation peoples around the globe. Libby, thank you for joining us today. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Catherine. Look, it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful that you contacted me and asked me to share my experience, because this is something that I just think is so important. In terms of who I am, there are lots of parts of me. This is a very human thing that I've learned through my experiences, is that we all have different parts. So the things that are important to me, I'm a woman, I'm a mum, I'm a partner, I am a daughter, I am a sister. My family is super important to me when it comes to who I am. When I express myself, I'm an artist, I'm an educator, and I'm a fierce ally for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I believe very, very strongly in acknowledging, recognising and celebrating the strength of First Nations people, but also, being really honest about the true history of Australia. So as somebody who comes from an Anglo coloniser background, I believe really strongly in restitution and recognition and sovereignty. So that's part of who I am, and I'm kooky. That'll do.
That's a great expression of who you are. I love that. Now tell me, I went to school with you and we've only just recently got into contact again. So tell me, when we first got in contact, you'd actually mentioned that you had quite a few people close to you that had actually died. Do you feel comfortable telling us a little bit more about those people that have died in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that conversations about death and dying are essential, and also being able to share experience and stories around death is really important. So I'm very, very comfortable with talking about it. I want to be able to celebrate what we do when somebody dies, but also probably part of my journey has been really difficult when people have passed away in my life. And so this is an opportunity to signpost some of the things that I found really difficult. And in some cases were really harmful for me, about the process and the experiences that happened when people died.
And can you perhaps talk me through one particular incident where someone close to you died?
Can I talk you through 2?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Because I think the manner in which somebody leaves our lives is, to an extent, it determines what sort of experience we might have. And I have lost both of my parents, my mother and my father, and they passed away in very different ways. And so my experience was very different both times. And as much as nothing prepares you, you sort of, if you've lost one parent, you think, I've done this before, I can do it again. But it is different. It's very, very different. So with my dad had a long-term illness. He was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so from when he was diagnosed, which was in around October, He then had treatment, and he was not diagnosed as terminally ill until the following March, and he passed away in May. So it was a really long journey with him. And also, when we found out that he was unwell, I was living overseas at the time. I was 17 years old, and I had taken what seems to be a really common thing these days, the gap year. Back in the olden days, the gap years weren't a thing, but I went and I took one because I was very young when I graduated from high school. And so I was overseas when he got sick, and there was lots of different decisions that needed to be made for me, but also around the family. And then there was a journey of 6 months where it was really an end of life for my dad, and it was a saying goodbye over 6 months gradually, and the experiences that went with that. It was a very different scenario with my mum. I was single and living out of home, and I was in my late 20s and partying it up and being a young person. We had a really, really strong relationship. So I would often go home to the country, because I come from a country town, and I was living up in the big smoke, and I would go home as often as I could and spend my time with her. And we were very, very close. She had a sudden heart attack, and it was incredibly unexpected, very sudden. And it was also a different kind of grieving, because I was almost saying goodbye to both of my parents again, and having to acknowledge for myself that I was now an orphan. And it sounds ridiculous to say that you're an orphan when you're 27, but you feel it. You really do feel it when those parental figures are both gone. It's a different kind of hollowness. So I wanted to say both, because I think that both are different journeys, and they impacted in different ways. Yeah.
And how would you say that they had actually impacted you when you look at the length of time that you had with your father, knowing that he was terminal, and then the lack of time that you had when your mother died?
Yeah, I think that both events for me were really traumatic. With my dad, having the time with him was special, and it was important, and it was the sort of growth that no 17-year-old should need to go through. But it was that was just what I got. That was what I got, so that's what I did. And I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about my dad and my relationship with my dad. It gave me time to almost suddenly become an adult, to be able to be an adult with him, because I was going to lose that. I wasn't going to be able to go through my adulthood having him in my life. So I suddenly was having those big question moments with him, and the storytelling, and the going back along generations, and asking about my grandparents, and asking about my dad's childhood, and the stuff that you think you've got time to talk about. We got the opportunity to talk about those things. So that was nice, and it was good to be able to take that time, even though it was really difficult to see him decline. And we didn't have any legislation in place in Victoria at that stage around the right to die with dignity. So there were a lot of hard choices that we had to make, and it was hard to watch him decline. He was 50, so he was still a young man. I now know. When I was 18 or 17, I thought 50 was old, and now I'm like, I'm almost 50. My brothers are older than my dad was when he passed away, and I feel like we're all young people. So he was so young, and it was so important to spend that time. When my mum passed away, there were so many things that were unsaid. Things that, in my mid-20s, as a young person, I was busy being selfish. Like, any normal mid-20-year-old, I was running around with my mates and going out partying, and every now and then I'd remember to call Mum back, and, she'd be following up on me and she'd be trying to give me advice. And I'd be like, oh, Mum, stop hassling me. And then suddenly she was gone. And there was this gaping hole in my life because the kind of relationship that we had, she was a mentor and a teacher, and she was a gift to me. And I didn't have that anymore, but I also hadn't been able to prepare myself for the loss of it. I thought she was going to be there forever. And at the age of 59, she was gone. And I was at sea as a young person. But I also had a lot of responsibility because my mum had asked me to be her executor of her will. And so that was, again, another time in my life where I had to grow up really super quickly. And I had to make really, really grown-up decisions. And I had to grieve at the same time. I had to be a daughter, and I had to be in this state of grief. But I also had to carry what is a privilege and an honour, but also a burden, which is to follow the wishes of an individual and administer the things that they have said they wanted administered in the event that they were no longer around. So they were different journeys and different life events, and they had their own beauty, and they also had their own pain. Yeah.
Talking openly about death and grief can sometimes be triggering. If you find you need support, please reach out to our support services and the bereavement organisations listed on our resource hub. All links are in the show notes of this episode. In relation to your parents dying, in the lead up and when you were growing up, was there any conversations about death? You mentioned that you had to administer your mother's her will, I'm assuming. So she had a will in place. And did your father have a will in place as well?
Yeah, look, I think my dad did. I just assumed so. I mean, it was so much more straightforward when Dad passed away, in that he had time to think about his dying, and he'd also sort of looked at it. He'd looked at the practical matters, so little fiddly things like joint bank accounts and mortgages and all of that stuff. Before he died, he just got Mum to he just signed everything over and transferred everything into my mother's name so that it wasn't really tricky when he died. So he was very pragmatic about it, and he was a practical kind of bloke. And it was simple because it was always just assumed that everything to do with my father just settled with my mother, and that was very straightforward. The only thing that got complicated was a couple of very private and sensitive items that my father had that had belonged to my grandfather. And that was an issue that landed with my mum and was very, very painful for her in terms of the dynamics of my father's family and the way that they treated her in the circumstances. But when it came to when my mum died, she'd really thought it through, because when my dad died, she got a big reality check. So she did all of the paperwork and made sure that everything was in place. And she'd been very, very specific in her will about the distribution of sentimental items to her, and she had lots of conversations with us. And I think that was because of the loss of my dad, and knowing that if she were not with us, that we would actually have to do all this stuff. So she was super specific and had lots of conversations. But we also had these weird conversations, because we grew up Catholic, and my mum grew up in a really, really conservative household. And so we had these weird, I remember like sitting on the farm with my mum and she was trying to write her will and I was looking over her shoulder and I'm the youngest. You got to understand that I'm the youngest in my family and I'm a girl. And I have an older brother who's the eldest in our family and she had appointed both of us as executors so that then, you know, there was a plan B. So if one person was busy or somewhere else or whatever, then the other person could kind of kick in and they had authority to make decisions. And Mum did this hilarious thing. I mean, I say it's hilarious, but it was actually terrifying at the time and also just like my brain wanted to explode because I was raised in a conservative family, but somehow my heart and soul was a feminist. You know, like I came out of the womb going, I'm a fully formed human being and just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I'm any less of a person. And nobody gave that to me. It was just built into me. And my mum came from this really super conservative upbringing and she was writing a will and she made this decision that everything in the family, all the any financial benefit, all of the objects, all of the heirlooms, everything went to my eldest brother because he was the eldest boy. And I felt like I'd gone back into a Dickensian novel. I was stuck in Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And I just looked at my mum and I went, you've got to be kidding me. Like, where is this coming from? I'm not going to be a spinster who receives a stipend from my eldest brother. Like, we're not living in Victorian times anymore. And she was really quite surprised that I had that conversation. I just went, dude, no, like you got 4 kids, just split it 4 ways.
Yep.
And she was surprised. And I was just like, I really did. Like I sat back and I just went, I can't believe I just had to have that conversation with you. Because Mum was really proud of the things that her daughters were doing. Like she was like, you know, you've got all this opportunity and you've got all of these advantages and you can go and you can do whatever you want to do and you can be whoever you want to be. And so this was the narrative I was hearing as a young woman. And then to have her sit down and go, but everything goes to your eldest brother. I was like, oh, nah, we're not doing that. So, I mean, it was a super important conversation to have. And we had to take hours at it. Like we had to talk about like, why is it that we've moved past Dickens and we're going to be equitable about this and that those traditions that she held, she didn't have to do it that way. She could make up her own mind what she felt was fair and didn't have to worry about what had been done in the past. So those were like, they were really critical conversations. And her experience of end of life and death within her own family had a number of occasions for her where there'd been huge family rifts occur and, you know, fighting it out over wills and possessions. So that was why she was really specific about who she wanted to have what. Like, you know, she didn't go around the house and put stickers with people's names on it, but she did say things like, I want my wedding ring to go to this person, or I want you know, we had this amazing cabinetry that everyone in the family loved and now is probably, you know, worth a fortune in a Scandinavian antique store. And so, you know, she made decisions about, well, the cabinetry is going to go to this person and, oh, what was it? Her school badge. That was funny. It was something that I didn't even think about, but she went to CLC and she had a school badge from when she was at CLC and she wanted that to go to her first granddaughter. So she was really specific about those little sentimental items. Because
CLC?
Catholic Ladies College. I don't think it exists anymore.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was back in the 60s when the Catholic girls would go off to school on the tram and they'd have to wear their blazers and their straw hats and their white gloves. And you know, it was something to be said that you graduated from CLC. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Now, obviously, the experiences of the death of your father and then the death of your mother were quite different.
Mm.
Did you have any support network, or was there any support that was offered to you during the times that you lost both parents?
Yeah. Okay. So, this will be a fun one. This is something I really want to talk about. This is, and especially because I was young when my parents passed, which is not necessarily a deciding factor, but I think it is something that's a consideration. Is the maturity and the age of a person when they lose a parent. And not just a parent, but anyone who is a really essential person, a part of their network that they're close to. And that is what people do around a grieving individual. Things I noticed and that I think about now that were unnecessarily hard. For example, people came back into our lives when my dad was unwell that we had very little contact with throughout my entire childhood and growing up. And it might sound a little harsh to put it this way, but they were not part of my growing up for a reason, and they didn't actually help. They were really unhelpful and could have done without it in retrospect. And I think when you do go through a period of grieving, it's very hard to tell who is supporting you and who is actually holding you back or even just not supporting you. So there were people around me and my mother when my dad died who were just, they were just curious. It's a little bit like, people have a morbid fascination with death almost. So being a little bit conscious of the people around you and what their motivations might be is something that I would say. But also when my mum died, and this may be a little bit because she died very suddenly and none of us were prepared for it. And I didn't have people around me at that stage, and I didn't have a support network. So I was busy trying to take care of everyone else and try and be responsible, and I wasn't looking after myself. And unfortunately, there were a number of people within sort of my sphere of influence, so within the family mostly, whom were particularly unhelpful. So the big thing that I would say is grieving is hard, and even if you feel like you're okay, make sure that you've got something, that you've got someone looking out for you, even if you're feeling strong and resilient and like you've got it all under control. One day you actually might need that support and you might need that network. So for me, it was around very slowly coming to the realization that I needed to exit some people from my life and do that very, very firmly and not have them impacting on me because they were harming me. And also being able to ask for help, whether that's through medical professionals, whether that is through mental health professionals, whether that's through peer support groups. The power of the internet is an amazing thing these days. Listening to a podcast is also excellent. And just trusting your instinct. One of the things that I didn't do was I didn't trust my instinct. There were a whole pile of things that happened where I went, oh no, I have to be kind and nice and understanding, and I need to make space for other people. And what I really needed to do was hold space for myself. So that would be something I would say really, really is incredibly important, is to build in those supports. And even if you have to do it quickly, do it And if you don't need it, great. But if you do need it, it's important.
And would you say that that's one of the most significant challenges, to actually make sure you take the time to do that for yourself and just check in with yourself?
100%. Yes. It is. It was probably the hardest thing for me to do, but it was so important. And in looking back over my grieving, I try and show compassion for myself, but I also go, oh God, I can't believe I did that, or oh, why didn't I see that? And like everything's super clear in hindsight, but when you're right in the middle of it, it's really, really, really hard to have perspective. So yeah, so making sure that you've got tools and knowledge, and even just somebody who's got eyes on you, who is going to back you and advocate for you when you can't advocate for yourself. Yeah, that would be a thing for me.
And would you say that any particular practical exercises that you were doing during that stage helped you to carve out that time for yourself? Was it, stepping away from what was going on for a period of time, or was it, zoning out with some music? What was the tools that you used that you're referring to during that period?
I'm going to be brutally honest here. I'm going to say it took me years. It took me years to grieve. So there was an intense period of time where I didn't do any of those things. And
that was just Libby's dog?
That was my dog coming in to say hello. So he's just going to climb up on the couch with me here. Yeah, look, I spiraled. I really spiraled after my mum died, and I was really unwell, and I knew I was unwell, but I didn't know how unwell I was. And I was trying to be brave, and and I had people around me saying to me, oh, you just got to toughen up. Oh, you just got to get over it. You've just got to do this, and this isn't normal. And, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And all of those really negative, harmful messages that aren't getting you anywhere. They're really not getting anyone anywhere. Like advice to being around people who are grieving, never tell a grieving person just to get over it, please. That's unhelpful. So it took me a long time because I didn't have the support network, and because I had some really wrong people around me. When I could, and there was a long time where I couldn't, but when I could, what I did was I did those things that you're talking about. So today, my experience would be completely different. And I'm not done with losing people yet. Like, I've got uncles and aunts that are aging. I have my own children. I have a partner. I have very close friends. So there will be new journeys that I will need to take that will be grieving journeys. So what I know today and what I do today is different from what I was able to do back then. And the things that I'm very conscious of now is having good conversations, but also having your go-to trusted circle of individuals. And different people in my life serve different purposes. So, but I know in my head who I would go to if I needed to talk to them about grieving, or if I needed to talk to them about the fact that I'm not coping. So I've got my key people who are safe people. It's like when you talk to your kids about the 5 fingers on your hand, you say, who are the 5 trusted people you could go to? I've done that. I've got those people in my life that I know on any given day of the week, they'll back me and they're going to hold me up. They're not going to pull me down. I listen to the best music all of the time, and I allow that to influence my mood. So if I need to be calm, then I will listen to calm. And if I need to get going, then I'm going to be listening to get up and go music. Music's very much part of how I care for myself. I get gentle exercise, I get sunshine, I get enough sleep. When I was grieving, one of the things that had a huge impact on me was insomnia. It was that hyperstimulation of grief and the big emotions that come with it, and also just what I like to call the mixtape, like, you know, the mixtape that never turns itself off. It was all of the thoughts that just couldn't stop, and so I had terrible insomnia. So today I sleep and I take care of my body, give it good healthy food and gentle exercise. I have a dog. My dog is my soulmate. And if I need to be in a space where I feel cared for, he undeniably adores me on any given day of the week, which is lovely because the feeling is mutual. So just building in what is meaningful for you and practices. So I have connection practices. And we were talking before we recorded this about my knitting, and I taught myself to knit because it was something that my mother did, and it felt like a deep connection, and she hadn't been able to pass the skill on to me. So I had to teach myself via YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. And a lot of hours on the sticks and, you know, getting it wrong before you get it right. But I use that as a sort of a deep spiritual connection to my mother, but also a moving meditation that allows me to calm myself if I need soothing. So it's almost like when you talk about kids having self-soothing strategies, all of the advice that you would give to a toddler is good advice for a grieving person as well. Because we're, you know, small people are just mini human beings. And I'm a human being, and sometimes I need to know how to soothe myself, and sometimes I need to go to someone else who can do that for me.
That's really lovely. And you mentioned that you're now a mother. You have two lovely boys, one in high school and one in primary school still.
Mm-hmm.
How is being a mother, how has that had an impact on your life in relation to, I suppose, you know, death?
Yeah, it's profound, isn't it? It gives you a sense of your own mortality and humanness to have dependence. So, and also feeling a responsibility to do things with kindness and dignity to their benefit, I think. And so the practical measures, when I say, you know, doing things with kindness and thinking about, if I die, ... kind of thing. So I haven't done it perfectly. In fact, probably far from. But, you know, let your kids know you as a person and really genuinely connect with you and the great parts of you. Like, we're all going to have bits of ourselves that we don't love, but help them be engaged with the things that you love about yourself, and give them a sense of what they inherit from you, either, you know, through just walking alongside you and growing up with you, but also the genetic stuff. And we're all neurodiverse in our family, so like it's a kooky house from end to end. We don't know about the dog. That's a maybe, but he's probably the most typical out of all of us. But being able to celebrate one another and be realistic about the fact that we have a finite amount of time together. And I've always said with my kids that I'm just holding the tiller until they can steer the boat. And so for me, it's about giving them the tools to be their own individuals and to be fine without me. Knowing that when they have me, they can always rely on me. They can come to me for anything at all. But if I'm not there, they're going to be okay. And you've talked about traits that, you know, the kids have inherited. Mm-hmm.
What is there any family traditions that, you know, your parents instilled in you that you've actually, having the children inducted into that family tradition, or is there something that you as a family have actually started as a new tradition that you're carrying on and would like to see carried on?
Oh yeah, we've got both and I love it. I love our quirks. The big thing that I share with my kids, and I do try and connect them with their grandparents as much as I possibly can, because I think it helps us place ourselves in the world. And that's something I learned about myself, was knowing that I am my own individual, but I am also made up of the parts of the people who've come before. So helping them have a sense of who the people were that existed before they came into the world and what they were like. So, for example, my grandfather, who's their great-grandfather, I tell them that he spoke 13 languages and that he was a professional interpreter. And then suddenly the kids have this interest in language. So, those connectors and those stories across generations have been important. But this will sound really basic, but mac and cheese. So there was a macaroni and cheese recipe, and we joked we still joke as siblings, but as we were growing up, we always said that our parents had 4 children so that they had a workforce that could produce, the dinner and do the chores and bits and pieces. I know is not true, but we had a really quite regimented upbringing. So we all had chores that we had to do. And one of the rules in the house was that the person who cooked the dinner didn't have to do the dishes. And then my parents convinced all of us that the dishes were the worst thing in the world to have to do. So we all learned to cook. And the first thing that I really learned to cook was macaroni and cheese. And it's made from scratch, and it's really basic and it's really yummy. And so it's the first thing that I've taught my children to cook. And it's that shared meal. It's almost like the winter comfort food for the soul that we all share. So that's a tradition that I'm passing to them, that I know that they will probably carry with them into their adulthood. They may end up with a morbid fear of macaroni and cheese or something. But also, they might, if they have children, then they might teach their children to cook that particular recipe. So food, because food brings people together. And are there any other traditions that we have, or things that are new? I mean, we have our own little languages and language items. So when my eldest boy was just starting to learn to speak, he would use these nonsense words as toddlers do, and then we would have to try and interpret whatever it was that he was trying to tell us. And some of them have stuck. So in our house, we drink a lot of soda water, and when we refer to soda water, we say fizzy plah. And it's because our eldest boy, when he was a toddler, called water plah, which took a long time to work out, can I say? So we always just called water plah, and then it seemed to make sense that if it was soda water and it was fizzy, then it was going to be fizzy plah. So if you walk into our house and you don't know our family and somebody says, "Mum, can I have a glass of fizzy plah?" you'll have no idea what we're talking about, but we all know what we're doing, and someone will get the soda water out.
Oh, that's so gorgeous. I love that. Fizzy plah. I'll never look at my soda stream the same ever again.
No, it's very hard. Once you know, you know.
Yeah, that's great. And based on your personal experience, Libby, what would be the 2 or 3 things that you could suggest to people that find themselves in a situation when they have actually had a parent die?
Oh, that's hard. Just going to take a big deep breath. I think I would go back to trust yourself. Grieve. Take time. Yeah. Do the grieving, and do it without judging yourself. And if somebody else is judging you, get them out of your way. Don't feel like there is a perfect grieving process. Every circumstance, every relationship, every event is unique. You will always be at a unique stage in your own life, on any given day if you lose someone. You will know more or less about something that you might at a different time in your life. You are going to do the best you can with what you have. So be kind to yourself and allow yourself to grieve, whatever that looks like. But if it looks like doing yourself damage, then get help. Because if part of your grieving process is to be self-sabotaging or self-harming, then that's a really dangerous journey, and it'll take longer and it will be really painful. So, yeah, I would say trust yourself, trust your instinct, be kind to yourself. And if you are not coping, it is okay. Reach out. There will be someone or something out there that is meant for you to support you through that grieving process, because it's tough and you don't have to be brave. You can be entirely not brave, and it is totally okay to be in that space. That's what I would say. Yeah.
So, Libby, based on your experience, if someone is wanting to support someone who has lost a parent or a sibling or anyone close to them and aren't quite sure how to offer support, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I do. Because I had a really rough journey when my mum passed away, and I could have done with more support. And one of the things that I learned going through that journey was that if you are around a grieving person and they are doing everything that they possibly can to look like things are normal, but they're not normal, it's a really good idea just to check in, but not just check in like, hey, how are you going? But to check in on what you know about that person already and what is their normal behaviour and what they might be throughout that grieving process. So, and I'll be a little bit more specific so that I can sort of join the dots with that and say, for example, when I went through that really traumatic grieving period, I was in a period of self-sabotage. So my normal behaviour would have been to, wake up in the morning, go to work, do the thing, earn the money, have a good time, make good friends, all of those things. But my behaviour changed. And so if you had asked me, oh, how are you going? Are you okay? Your mum's not here anymore. How are you coping with everything? My response to that sort of question would have been, yeah, no, I'm fine. Like I'm doing okay. I've got things, but my behaviour said something completely different. So I was socially withdrawn. I did not want to talk to people where I normally would have been a very, very busy person in terms of social engagements and those sorts of things. And I slowly made my world much, much smaller. And the reason I think I did that was because everything felt so out of control for me that the only way that I could feel the sense of control was to make my world smaller. But it got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it was so tiny that I didn't have the things that I needed to make sure that I was okay. So I suppose if you're seeing behaviour that contradicts what someone's saying to you, then there's probably something going on that needs support. And there are lots of ways to put in place that support. Like you don't have to sort of go in gung-ho and say, oh, you need this and you need that and you have to do this. But it's the asking, and sometimes it's the slow conversations. It's the asking, what is it that you need? And then giving somebody time to actually not know what they need until they can express it in a way that makes sense for you. So for me, if someone had sat down with me and said, is there anything that I can do? What is it that you need? I wouldn't have had an answer for them straight away. But ultimately what I needed was I needed to know that I was going to be okay. And I needed someone to tell me that, but not insist that I already was okay or I should be okay. I needed someone to say, do this how you need to do it, but also please look after yourself. And if you can't, please let me look after you just for that little while you can't do it. That would have been helpful.
So I suppose if someone is noticing someone withdrawing from social commitments, from their usual way in which they would behave, as you were describing, perhaps is it correct in saying that instead of just asking the "Are you okay?" and asking it the once and going, "Yep, tick, I've asked them, they've said they're fine, that's fine," is that asking more of a series of questions and allowing time for the answers to come forward?
Yeah, I think it is. And look, mental health professionals work in this space a lot, and I'm not a mental health professional, but I've had some experience as lived experience. And what I would say is the answer today can be different from the answer tomorrow or a week later, and that when someone's in a process of grieving, it takes time. And so if you've checked in once, that's not enough, especially if it's someone who's important to you or whom you think may be vulnerable. Then it's remembering to maybe put a little thing in your phone to pop up to say, hey, send them a text message once a week, or give them a quick 5-minute call, and ask the question, how are you feeling? Is there anything going on for you? Is there anything I can do? And doing it over a duration of time, because I think you're probably when I was going through this, someone could have worn me down. They could have worn down my false bravery. So, I was trying to be really just, pretending, putting on that the mask of normality. If you had asked me in enough times, I probably would have been worn down to, no, I'm not okay. Yeah. So it is a matter of, making a commitment to someone. If you know it's important, if you recognise that it might be needed, then making that sort of, and you don't have to say it to them. You don't have to say, I'm making a commitment that I'm going to call you once a week for the next forever. It's like you just make that little mental note to say, I'm going to check in, and I'm going to check in regularly. And if you're worried, and anyone out there who's done mental health first aid before would know this, if you're genuinely worried, then go through those really important checklists. If you think that someone is potentially at risk, don't ask them, are you okay? Ask them, are you okay? Do you feel like you are safe? Do you feel like you might do something unsafe? Like, you got to go to the tough questions. Like, that's the next level. When something looks like it is not operating well, be really direct.
Libby, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
No worries, Catherine. And as I said before, it is a privilege to have the conversation, and I think we can't talk about this enough. So I want to say, be proud of yourself for having the initiative, because if I had had access to something like this in the past, it would have been a really powerful support for me, I think. So I'm grateful that you're doing it, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share my stories.
Well, thank you very much for sharing, Libby. Yeah. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Don't Be Caught Dead, brought to you by Critical Info. If you liked the episode, learnt something new, or were touched by a story you heard, we'd love for you to let us know. Send us an email, even tell your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. If you can spare a few moments, please rate and review us as it helps other people to find the show. Are you dying to know more? Stay up to date with Don't Be Caught Dead by signing up to our newsletter and follow us on social media. Head to don'tbecaught.dead.com for more information and loads of resources.